I'm kind of becoming fossilized and becoming a dinosaur now in terms of all the young generation coming up with all the new ideas. Since then, there's been a journey of recalibration. We're still not in that zone where everything can be done with AI yet.
Freshers are difficult to get their visibility because of AI is taking over.
In the end, an opportunity to do something different is always better than doing the same thing over and over again. I think you realize that as you get more and more senior, you need to be more ambidextrous.
So that's the massive change just because of the internet boom.
I think it's people are familiar with India, Indians are familiar with the rest of the world. It's less of a thing now.
Reimagining their processes with the help of AI.
You do not have too many industry level standard libraries yet.
It's human and machine operating together, right?
With AI, I can build a lot faster.
We will be hiring agents to do the same thing. So how the leaders think about when to go for build, when to go for buy.
As a leader, you need to be nimble and agile and pivot.
Do you think India is positioned to lead the next wave of digital or AI driven industries globally?
AI can code whatever you can. You are no longer required. It is not that. Are we at the cutting edge of creating AI level tech? No, we're not.
Hey everyone, this is your friend Anil, and today I'm super excited to host a very, very special guest, my guru, my mentor, and truly one of the most humble leaders I've ever met, Angshuman Kanjilal. If you ask me who I aspire to be like, it's like him. With over 25 years of experience managing global delivery team, he is one of the transformation leaders who's heading one of the most successful GCCs in the world. This episode is going to be insightful, real, and deeply inspiring. So make sure you watch till the end and don't forget to tell us which part you love the most. Drop your question in the comments or email. I'll promise you will get them answered even offline. Thank you so much. I remember when I was working with you, right? You always talk about that, Anil, we should have our lab, right? You were leading a big team that time also, right? And you were aspiring, okay, I need to do like Python, I need to do Java, right? And now when I am leading a big team, I can also correlate, right? How important it is to be like tech savvy so that you hire a right team, you set up the right process. But maybe just tell from your perspective, right? At your experience, 25 years in the industry, still you believe that having hands-on experience is critical and crucial?
Yes, absolutely. Even in the age of AI, even in the age of cloud writing, a lot of the code that we used to write in our day, I think it's helpful because unless you're a practitioner of what you do, it's difficult to provide leadership credibly. I think that becomes, that has been a mantra for me. So you have to be rooted in terms of your profession. I mean, if you compare to other industries, ours is probably the only profession. I mean, although that is changing where the more senior you get, the more removed you are from the basic thing that you do, which is build software and provide business outcomes through building software for our businesses and clients. I think that is something that kind of shows when you kind of are not that close to the ground. So I think that has helped in many ways because it could be when you're building a team, it could be in terms of taking a decision. It could be in terms of challenging, current norms. If you want to swim upstream or trying to do something differently, it could be in terms of inspiring your team to learn more. There are so many ways, and I think you're just taken more seriously when you're when you understand and you speak the same language as the team does.
So now, if you say a leader of your experience, or maybe something that you must be following yourself, which technology, which tool, which platform do you recommend that someone should be really hands-on?
I think if follow whatever it is at that point of time which is required to build the right kind of software, right? So now, regardless of programming languages, we are not in that world which is unidimensional anymore. So you need to know a stack at the very beginning. Now, potentially you get to a level of point where you're able to design systems. So then you can use other tools to generate your code and so on. We're still not in that zone where everything can be done with AI. It's still some distance away. I think using, for example, AI even responsibly, I think that becomes important. But I think more than, apart from the tech rather, one also needs to focus on the value, the business value that you end up creating. Purely in terms of talking about the fact that this is the part that I built and that's where it ends and that's where it stops and on to the next thing, that probably isn't good enough. So now it is about how do you correlate all the way to the business value and what the client needs or what the users need to what you're building, and do that end-to-end journey and understand that very well and design to that. I think that end-to-end journey becomes important. It becomes important.
Right. And I think that is going to make freshers' job even more difficult, because when we were talking about offline, right, that freshers are difficult to get their visibility because of AI is taking over, right? And someone who has never worked on any programming language or anything in production, they will struggle to get understanding, comprehend the problem statement. And it is becoming more and more difficult because first, no one will give them a job. I think you mentioned the very correct point about like someone who's at a freshest level, they will feel it difficult to understand the problem statement, driving the business outcome, right? Which I believe after 17, 18 years in my career, even when I talk to business, it becomes difficult for me to realize, okay, whether they are targeting 25 million, 30 million, because they are also not very sure. And it comes out of that discussion, it comes out of a lot of research, market research. So I completely agree to your point. I'll move to the next point. Despite your senior role and success, you are known for being incredibly humble. How do you keep that grounded perspective?
I mean, I don't try to be consciously humble, and I think you keep telling me that,
Yeah.
but I don't think that's a conscious. I mean, I think it's about being yourself, really. I don't think I go out of my way to be humble or anything like that. It never crossed my mind. I think I don't know now if you're asking the question. I think if I think about my thought process, I think I genuinely do feel that I'm surrounded by people who are significantly better than me. And that has nothing to do with hierarchy or time spent in the organization or in the profession or as individuals, as persons. We are all individuals. We all have our own journeys. I do genuinely feel that somebody in my team, for example, if you're talking about hierarchical, the nature of how organizations are built, right?
Right.
So from that perspective, I do not think that, let's say, somebody 4 or 5 levels down the chain compared to me in terms of age or hierarchy is less smart than I am. Chances are very high, and it's much more likely that he would know more than I do. He would be more connected to tech than I do. He's more current on trends than I do. His ability to operate and think is significantly faster than mine.
Yeah.
If I play a game of chess, I'm sure the chances are high, at least, that he will beat me faster than I can. From that perspective, I think it is not about consciously trying to be humble. It is about the fact that we are basically playing our roles. And as a result of perhaps time and experience of being in a situation, that if you're in a situation the second time, how that's going to pan out and what you would want to do. So the idea is to basically share that and share that knowledge sometimes. So sometimes it may feel that I would know more in a situation and I'm more senior in that situation. It's just that I probably got more gray hair and I've been there and I've made more mistakes in that situation, so that you learn from it and you make sure you don't, or at least you try not to make them again, and you start to.
Remember when I joined the current organization, I called you and asked, Angshuman, I'm going to lead a team, right? This is the first time I'm going to act in a leadership role, right? And the one thing that you mentioned, I still remember that. Have empathy for you people, right?
Yeah.
Make it easier for them to reach out to you, right? And spend more time with the team, right? So stay grounded. And I don't know, means for you it is natural. For me, it may not be natural, but just because I follow you a lot, it helped me personally, and I try to create that culture in the team so that anyone at any given point in time, they just find it very easy to ping me on Teams, ping me on messages, right? So that thing probably as a leader, right, that you teach and aspire others like me, help my teams as well.
No, that's really good to know. Actually, it's not my theory or this, but it's common sense that what motivates us as individuals or humans. I mean, we we don't do really well in stressful situations. We don't do very well in general. Most of us, at
Right.
least. At least I'm not in that category. We don't really do well when our prefrontal cortex sort of takes over and you make emotional decisions. You typically thrive when you're in an environment which is encouraging, which doesn't beat you up for your mistakes as long as you learn from your mistakes. It is generally, people do feel motivated when their own likings or their own motivations per se are linked to the motivations of their leader or the manager or their organization. So you have to find that sweet spot,
Right.
where the person you are assigning something to do, they sort of actually enjoy it. That's a sweet spot. You may not get a full alignment.
Yeah.
You may get a partial alignment, but you try to get as close as possible, to the fact that that person is not doing it because they have to do it, but because they sort of want to do it. So it's about, it makes a leader's job a little harder in terms of how you construct your team and design your work and design the people around them. So it's better to spend the effort on that, on the construction of the teams, on the dynamics of how people work with each other, rather than throwing random set of people into a setup and then micromanaging them to death. So that sort of doesn't work. Successful teams are always where people are in sports, or it's you can take anywhere. They always work when the group works together. The group works together when they know the leader has their back, the environment is fine, and so on. So it's not rocket science really. It just needs the manager or the leader to put in a bit more effort
Right.
into
And I have
success.
also observed, right, so going to the other side of this humble and kind nature, right? Sometimes people take this taken for granted, right? When you're
Happens.
like too easy to be approached, and like then most of the time, right, you get their tough questions, right? Their tough demands.
Yeah.
So how to deal with that type of situation? Like how do we balance it?
Well, sometimes you have to pull the manager card, right? I mean, that's the reason you would not want to do it.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately you draw the line somewhere, right? So when the intent is right, everything is fine. So there's no harm in being challenged or something. But I think there should be no compromise on ethics or discipline or the best interests of the team. If you stray from that, then obviously there's a bit of a nudge to go back or align,
Right.
or at least call out the fact that, well, if you're not, then it's not acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
Because that also is respect for the rest of the team, which is
Sense.
my learning.
So the next question, and thanks for giving a lot of details around this topic, because it's very important for any leaders who want to lead a big team and create that impact. This is more about icebreaker question, I would say, and this is more interesting. If you don't do your current role and not in the current corporate job, what other career would you love to try?
I Something to do with music is something that does come to my mind. I do spend a lot of time listening to music. I do try and ensure my kids learn music, things that I did not have the opportunity to do, or learn some sort of an instrument. Yeah, I mean something to do with the music scene. So I do like audio. I think I somehow feel that I could. That is an area where, if not, I would not have made a mark, but at least I would have enjoyed
Okay.
myself a
So
lot.
is it like creating music?
Yeah, creating, listening. So creating, listening. I don't have the skills to create,
Okay.
but I do. I think I do have a. Sometimes I do feel that I have a sense for it in terms of appreciating what's sounding well and what's sounding off.
Yeah.
My early childhood, my father, he forced me to learn some Indian classical music. Did
Okay.
that for 6 7 years. Completely didn't have any interest in it at that time.
Okay.
And I at the first opportunity, I said I'm not doing this.
Okay.
But without realizing, there are some neurons get triggered perhaps in your brain. So 25 years later, you start to realize and you start appreciating it.
Okay.
Then I said, yeah, this makes sense. That makes sense. And I learned this, or I knew this. And then you sort of feel that, yeah, that's something that, that would have been nicer to
So are
learn.
you like any of your kids are interested in music or something like outside of what you have tried in your career?
I mean, my son plays the guitar. He plays the guitar very well. I wanted him to, because I think it's a bit of a childish thing, right? I mean, when you're in college, in our time, very few people knew how to play the guitar, and they used to be celebrities instantly.
Right.
And then I had a thing for music, so I forced him to learn the guitar.
Yeah.
These days, I think every kid learns. Half of all kids play the guitar. But having said that, he's continued with it, and he kind of does pretty well there. And my daughter is learning to sing a bit and play the keyboard. My son is like more into it now. I don't have to chase him. He kind of runs
Got
around
it.
on his own, and he kind of uses it as a stress buster.
So on the career side also, right,
Yeah.
you and I discussed a lot of time, right, that someone should do well in their job or someone should start their own company, startup, right? A lot of crazy things I still remembered.
I mean, if I relate it to my generation, right? I think our generation started off around the time when Y2K was just ending, and which is there, and we were talking about it and so on. And since then, we were on this boom phase where jobs were getting created. A lot of people would join these organizations, and we've grown with it. The whole outsourcing thing that really took off after that. I think that kind of career curve is was a once in a generation thing, and or once in a lifetime thing, or once in a whatever few hundred years thing. It's over now. So now, obviously, when you come to startups, I think those are probably better engines for growth. Now, I think the generation currently, while they do not have the advantage that our generation had, where suddenly there was this huge explosion in jobs and everybody went towards it, what you call IT. I think this current generation probably has a different benefit also, which is the fact that they have a bit of a financial foundation that their parents can provide in most cases, a more supportive environment, access to resources,
And roti.
rosy roti, and exactly, and they have access to information for free, right?
Right.
Infinite information
Right.
and processed, canned, everything now. It's way more structured. So they have access to a lot of knowledge. So from that perspective and the financial cushion that they have, I would probably say start as early as you can.
Okay.
I think India, if you're doing it in India, there's a large number of problems to be solved. There are many of these problems that have been solved in other organizations, so you don't have to kind of really, really think through and come up with the next big idea. I mean, great if you can, but sometimes it is just about applying what works somewhere else and tweak it and applying it here. There is a lot of opportunity to scale because I don't think we have really mined that market well enough because there are so many issues, there are so many gaps, there are so many differences
Right.
across the whole country.
Yeah.
Of 1.4 billion, it's the largest population in the world, right? So there's a huge market to do a lot of things, and financial cushion and the effort and the knowledge.
Sooner is better.
The sooner you can, the better. I mean, to be honest, sometimes it's about where you are in life, how comfortable you are, and do you have the financial cushion to do it?
Right.
And those things come up when you reach my age, for example, or and you kind of have choices to make and so on. So at that point of time, either you have the financial cushion, go for it. Even then, the same thing applies. But the if you're starting off, all you have to do is focus on a career, and the sooner you get it, the better it is.
Because I still like recall with this example, right? Perplexity, Mr. Arvind Srinivas, right? He started, and I've seen his company like starting from zero to $20 billion valuation just in 3 years. That is massive. I've seen like many big organization in service industry. They are still struggling to touch this number. They've been operating for last 20 years, 20 to 25 years, right? Just because that overall ecosystem is supportive, right? People are bold enough to take decisions. Dropout from colleges are happening. I know some of the content creators, right, who I've been following, like they were in their college days during the COVID time. Now they are attending events with Microsoft, Apple. They are like 20 to 23 years experience, right?
Yeah.
So that's the massive change I've seen just because of the internet boom and the acceptance, global acceptance for all the
And
techies around the world.
right, and to be honest, I mean, if you look at fresh grads who are coming out of college now, I think in our time we would look for stability, right? A large multinational company, Tag, which is well known, used to be an icing on the cake. The fact that it was as basic as when I started, it was which was way before you did. It was as basic as free internet. You have an office where you have access to a computer, you can do your own thing, you can connect, whether you can listen to music or write code. There is a coffee machine down the counter. That itself used to be a huge difference and luxury. I think things have moved on since then. I think a lot of kids to do pass out of college today are actually looking at more interesting work. They're looking to do more research. My feeling, and my strong feeling is that we are at the cusp of that. There's a lot of talk about a lot of good tech doesn't really come from India. We are like good copycats.
Yeah.
But I think we are at the cusp of that beginning to change now because
Right.
there's a lot of talent that is actively looking to do more exciting work because they're not really impressed by the multinational tag anymore.
Right.
They're not really running after stability because their parents are giving them that cushion. So their primary motivation is about doing what makes interesting work. And once you start to do that, it becomes very similar to some of the other markets in the world, which kind of spurs innovation. And so, yeah, fingers crossed. I mean, hopefully, we are kind of we might be at the very beginning stage of a big tech boom, but a very different kind of tech boom compared to the ones that at least we have seen in the last.
Yeah. I was interviewing someone from one of the GCCs in India, and he mentioned very important point that until by 2030 there will be 1500 GCC in India.
Yeah.
Right? So the market is booming, and that's the very common message across all the leaders, they are talking about that India is a path to get more developers and engineer consumed and more innovative work happening in India.
Yeah.
For example, this like the chip programming that is happening for the very first
Right.
time in India, right? There is the government support on these startups. So a lot of great things happening. But moving next to
Yeah.
our question, it's more about, I know that you have been part of several big implementations around the ERPs. What's your playbook for ensuring success in such complex? It takes years in deciding whether to go for ERP change or not, or ERP implementation or not. So what
I
is
think there are some obviously some very unique things about any large platform implementation like an ERP or any other big platform, and they tend to be very, very difficult projects. And the reasons are simple. What any software engineering book will tell you, they are not agile.
Yeah.
They are huge waterfall endeavors where there are multiple parties with different interests sometimes who come together to do get you an outcome, and it happens over a period of time. Usually these are multi years, and in today's day and age, multi years program, stakeholders change, the requirements change, pretty much everything changes. Where you started off with the underlying assumptions, though many of those assumptions are invalidated midway through the project or toward the end of the project, there you're dealing with a completely different thing, with a completely different stakeholders, with a completely different vendor ecosystem, and the organization will also kind of been restructured. So usually all of that happened because of the time it takes. See, I don't playbook, but some of the lesson that things that I've learned from failure is to just recognize this bit, that when you're implementing a platform or a large platform, it's different because they, especially if it's things like SaaS, right? So you would have to reorganize according to the platform. Okay. Rather than the platform changing for you. And that becomes the hardest part because it's not the technology which is the problem. The problem is the people, yeah, who end up using the product, and who would, and there are many dimensions at play. And there are it can range all the way from, I like my previous system, why doesn't the new system do this, at a very simple level, to the fact that there are significant integrations with your current ecosystem because it's not a standalone thing. They also are changing and behave in their own ways across the organization. Right. You run into the problems of legacy. There is data migration, configuration migration. To my mind, I think it's a combination of planned this really well, except that this is waterfall to a great extent. So, which means that the importance of planning and running it is extremely important. But at the same time, whatever you can, wherever you can iterate through some form of agile, do that. So, if there is anything on the periphery where we can do proof of concepts very early on, yeah, and validate your assumptions from an end to end perspective, it's easier because at least things that cut across the vendor, the platform itself. Right. Most implementation that I've seen have also exposed platform level bugs.
GST bug
Yeah.
in one of
So
the implementations?
yeah, so inevitably they would expose this. So the idea is to how the sooner you uncover them, the better it is, and set expectations with stakeholders.
Right.
Actually get them on board into the project itself, so that there is collective responsibility and there's no finger pointing
Right.
in terms of the project. And also perhaps there are many things, but keep a cutoff date to the project,
Right.
where which doesn't mean that the project ends,
Yeah.
which means that the budgeting has ended and now it can be incrementally evolved over a period of time. So find that acceptable bare minimum to finish the project and then continue for a few years.
So basically, strong project management and stakeholder management, right, are the key things that you are.
And wherever you can do experiments, POC. That is one thing that you have to pick up from agile deliveries as well. I mean, full on waterfall projects also fail. So waterfall projects are generally risky. I'm personally never a fan of such
Yes.
projects, but it's just the way it is.
Buffalo and elephant story is very
Correct.
common. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. The next one is a little bit on, because these big implementations require like team ramp up, right? And after the implementation is done, you may wanna like streamline your team, right? So there are some decisions related to layoffs or maybe repurpose of the teams. So have you been part of such strong and difficult decisions? And if so, like what is your mental state, and then how do you cope up with all such situation or event?
Well, I think it's a difficult one, right? So I think over a period of time, as you grow in your career lifetime, you would be in a situation where one has to take such difficult decisions. They're not ideal. I think By I think the first thing is to probably give that whoever individual is affected a lot of opportunity to kind of find other things, or at least provide some sort of support so that their personal impact is mitigated and they can find something within or outside and so on. You would obviously want to structure it in a way so that that is the absolute last option, so which kind of basically means that, and it's very transparent, it's very clear that to the individual and the team as well, that there are other options that were potentially explored. But it is a part of life, unfortunately, that these things happen because you are aligned to the business, and sometimes the business you know requires such decisions to be taken. Sometimes it is performance based. The first time I've been in the conversation, I was very disturbed. I still do once in a while if this happens. For better or for worse, I think the everybody basically ends up finding something else. So the idea is that sometimes it's a big, sometimes some people have actually come back and said that that is probably a good thing that happened in hindsight, because they kind of, sometimes you kind of light a fire which they end up being perhaps in a better position than they would have been if that incident had not happened. So not ideal. One of it's quite an uncomfortable thing to do, but I think my view is that if you have to do it, then A, explore all the options, and B, do it in a as much of a humane way as possible, with a lot of respect.
Yeah, thinking about their reskilling, upskilling, and be
In the entire act of doing it, right, that conversation needs to be very humane. It's important that one listens.
got it. This is really helpful. In the environment that you operate, right? Sometimes it is very difficult to manage two teams competing with each other for a common goal, right? And you have to align them. So how do you manage like resolving conflict between two teams, or maybe two individuals, right? So that it is helping organization to achieve its target.
Organizational politics, I mean, it depends, right? If you're one of those two teams, that's a different answer. Then if it's two teams that are within your control, my obvious reaction will be to stop it, because get them together and work together each other. And sometimes about dividing work and all of that. And see, I think as humans, sometimes if you have done something for a long time, or one feels that this is my area of expertise, and let's say someone else is asked to do that, and that is not really according to us their area of expertise, or probably competing, that flight or flight fight syndrome starts to kind of kick in. And I think it's probably a function of growth mindset. So I think it's important for us to kind of think of us as multidimensional individuals. So I am an expert in a certain module of a certain system, and I'm not the one called on to do a major project that impacts that module, and someone else is. So that will kind of create that response potentially. If I am leading both those teams, my understanding will be to first of all explain why that decision has been taken. Sometimes it is as simple as that I'm just wanting to cut dependency.
Okay.
You're pretty good, and or I want you to learn other things. But at least whatever the reason is, I think that needs to be clear, and it should be clearly demarcated as to the motivations need to be explained. If I'm one of those teams, for example, I would obviously want to understand why as well, if it's within my two teams, right? So the first thing is to identify and explain what's causing the conflicts. If you're in a situation where you have to compete, first thing I would probably do is to find out why that had happened. I'm sure there's a larger design to it. The other is not feel bad about it, because we don't grow up to be a I don't know, a PL SQL developer, for example. We can do multiple things. So it's an opportunity to learn other skills. I mean, it's not like cricket, right? That suddenly fifth down the order and somebody's taken my position, where do I go? So it's not like that. It's not very fuzzy in our industry. You learn new skills and you do other things. And in the end, an opportunity to do something different is always better than doing the same thing over and over again.
And I think you and I discussed this offline also, right? You have a very good habit of letting go things. So delegating some of the work that you earned over the period of time to someone next person, and then you start doing something new. I've been following this, but maybe just wanted to understand from your perspective how it helped, and maybe if you want to quote some of the examples.
You just grow more, right? So I've been fairly long time in my current organization, and I think the only, perhaps the biggest reason I have managed to is that I've continuously changed teams. It has been in terms of roles, like from developer to management to functional and so on. It has been across different teams in terms of the domain itself changing multiple times. It can also be in terms of the nature of the challenge that you kind of face. You could be like very, very customer facing, or you could be very deep down tech build kind of thing. I think you realize that as you get more and more senior, you need to be more ambidextrous, and you need to switch multiple angles. You need to work with people, stakeholders, team, technology. You need to switch constantly.
Right.
I think I would probably say a very perhaps an oversimplified way of looking at it is that I probably spent 2 years doing one thing for the first 15 years of my career.
Okay.
Every 2 years, it was just one thing, one stack, one type of thing. But since then, and increasingly today, for example, I probably do all of those things multiple times a day. I think that unidimensional nature would not help me play my role. The nature of my role itself is that I have to go into a conversation where I'm dealing with some responsible AI conversation. It then goes into a production support thing, then stack switches to a people issue. It could switch to a Java development. It could be a team thing. It could be a site leadership conversation. It could switch back to an HR discussion. It could be a financials conversation. And they would all be in the same day throughout the day. So it's always helps if you've been in multiple places. And the more you have done, more complete as an individual you get.
Exactly.
So that's probably my biggest revelation. And I would continue doing that. I mean, and if you get the opportunity to keep changing, that's probably the best way.
The junior level, I can correlate, right? Because some of my team members that since they've worked years in just doing the Angular programming, they would love to continue doing the same thing. So the example that I quote tell about this thing, when you give this work to someone else, you start doing something else, right? And that's how, like, when I saw my career, I started with the database developer, then front end, then back end, and then it all helped me to become a good system architect, designing architect, right? And then over the period of time, if you continue to do these things, you become enterprise level architect. And then the next level is thinking about big implementations, right? So just because if I would stick myself to a role for a very long time, I'll be just doing a medoc of that thing, right? This is very thought provoking. Next thing that I want to talk about, you hire a team or you hire a talent, you groom them, you make them what they are today. They feel bad about whatever you have done just because of ignorance, or sometimes it's individual behaviors, right? They start working against you, right? Against your principles. They move to different teams and start creating challenges for you, right? It happened to everyone as a leader, right? So in such kind of situation, how do you see, like, how to identify such individuals early in the game, or maybe the other way is spend time with those resources who are aligned to your thought process for a very long time?
I mean, probably first thing I'll say is that I don't make the individual, right? So people become you remove roadblocks,
Yeah.
in their normal growth path. My job as a manager is or leader is not to build them or mold them. They shape themselves. These things happen, right? So I think simple thing is to try, at least it's not easy, to keep the emotion out of it. Look at it objectively in terms of what is the best in the best interest of the team or the group or the objective. Typically, I think it's important to act very fast. The moment you identify there is a problem, there are many ways. Obviously, you will have a conversation upfront, and if nothing works, act as quickly as you can. You don't want them to kind of create roadblocks for yourself or your team, right? So you want to act them, either we move them into a different group or a team or whatever action you want to take. You probably have to take them very, very swiftly. Now, they could be situational in terms of what course of action that you take, but it's important to take very, very decisive, swift action rather than letting it linger and fester.
So that bad apple not going to help in the team for a very long time. It's going to spoil the
Yeah.
rest of the team members.
Beyond the point, also, I feel that, sometimes in the interest of this thing, fundamentally, we have a business goal to meet. We work for our clients. At the end of the day, everything adds up to that. If you kind of have a challenge like this, I think it's important. Sometimes that, grooming will not help, supporting will not help. It will take many, many years. So it's important to find that balance, right? You want to do that, but once you're convinced that it's not working out, then you will have to take whatever action you need.
Next thing I want to ask, like, because you hire a lot of leaders, right? A lot of team members. When you hire a leader who lead different other teams, how do you identify a right person for that? What is your strategy or style?
That's a hard question, but I think it depends. It's situational, depend on what role you're trying to kind of get. So obviously, you will look at certain characteristics like whether they have the hard functional skills or tech skills for that job. Beyond that, it is also about working with people and how they kind of deal with problems. You obviously look at think people who can solve problems very quickly and how deeply they can think across multiple dimensions, not having an oversimplified response to most things. I mean, the more senior you get, you deal with a lot of ambiguity and a lot of variables. So we would obviously present, I would typically in my conversation would have a discussion about various ways in which, or making it more situational. It's not rocket science. I think that is the standard process that everybody would follow. I think it becomes a bit of subjecting them to more real questions around what really happens, and so sort of helps that way, so that you can make those decisions quickly and you can expose the kind of to real situations, rather than sometimes if you don't have that skill within your team or your department, then you go outside to kind of ensure that you do. I mean, it's not very difficult. It's just that you look at all of these skills, and I think I do place a lot of emphasis on how they would work and how the chemistry will work with the rest of the team, because it is a team sport. It's important for, especially when you're hiring senior folks, they need to be able to take people along, their team, their stakeholders, clients. They should have a way of taking everybody together.
As a follow up to this, so when you are managing a global team, right, how difficult it is, like what are the common changes or differences that you would observe, like those who are working from India and not working from India, in terms of their ownership, their working style, or in terms of their communication?
So I've had a change of opinion over periods of time. I think in the early years of my career, I used to feel that people who are closer to the client location, while they understand the business better, but they have zero understanding of how it works, and it felt like a very distant set of people. The individual that we would interact with, they would be part of a certain group of people who are externalized from the main thing that is happening in our team. And there was also a thing about, we would chase a lot of appreciation that has somebody from, I don't know, US or Germany or UK or wherever. It sounded good if the client or somebody from the client location appreciated, typical outsourcing way of life basically in our careers earlier on. I think since then, I think the world has changed. We've all changed. I have also changed. Today, if you ask me that question, I would say there is absolutely no difference. I think humans are humans. They're all trying to do their best. And I don't think there is it's about your skills that you bring to the table. It's not about the location that you're from. I firmly believe that. And that determines everything. It's about what you bring to the game.
So that also qualifies the success of GCC in India.
So it's about skills. It's not about locations. But I think in general, I think my realization is that whoever I work with globally, their motivations, things that they get motivated by, things that they get frustrated by, the dynamics of the team, politics of the team, issues with manager, teams, other teams, all of those dynamics are exactly the same regardless of location. And sometimes they're intra location as well, where you would have groups of people from a certain team across multiple geographies at it against a group of people from multiple geographies from another team. I don't think location is relevant. I also used to think that language accent also is relevant. I don't think it is anymore. And my views changed over the last 4 or 5 years. I would look at whoever is best for that particular role. It depends on where you are, what you're basically doing. Everything is a skill, and language is a skill, communication is a skill, tech skills are skills, people skills are skills, leadership is a skill, everything is a skill. You need a combination of skills sometimes, and it depends on what combination of skills you want to deploy where for maximum impact.
Relatable. And I see, like, even when I work with my US client, they also feel very comfortable working with our team at Offshore. And the reason is, like, over the period of time, they become so habitual with this model that they find it like as good as talking to their teams. And this communication skill, right, everything is working so coherently.
The other thing is that, see, I mean, 25 years ago when I started, and I would be the first time I was in a call, and we used to have these star phones. There was no VC, and you would speak to somebody with an American accent. It felt very cool as well that, here we are sitting in Bangalore and doing something important. But it felt very different again. My name is a little complicated to pronounce for some people. And I've seen in my growing up in school, people struggle to pronounce my name correctly even in India. Increasingly, I think over a period of time, cultures have come together across the world. People kind of take care of how they pronounce names and things like that, and many names are familiar. So a Nikhil or a Vikram is a very common name, and everybody gets it. Or an Anil, for example.
Anil, though it's not that straight, that's the reason, because my
Exactly.
surname, they usually silent J in it.
Okay.
That's the reason, rather than having Anil Bajpayee talks, it is AB talks.
AB talks.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So yeah, but then again, it's kind of, I think people have come closer, and I think we know there's a lot of names which are now familiar to everybody. So I think languages, accents, we're all used to each other's accents a lot more than we were earlier. So yeah, I mean, I think it's people are familiar with India. Indians are familiar with the rest of the world. It's less of a thing now.
Moving to the next section, and this is very interesting. This is all about AB Talks on AI. So we are going to talk about AI, data, and technology.
You know a lot more about AI.
I've been like learning through some of these discussions, but definitely let's talk through some of these important points. So, one, that how large organizations, that industries like you operate in, or similar industries in your network, how they are reimagining their processes with the help of AI.
I think everybody's obviously on board with AI now. It's like it's front and center.
No more buzzword.
I don't think that we're off that phase of 2 years, 2.5 years ago. I mean, AI has been around for some time, but the generative AI actually kind of accelerated matters. And I think we're wowed by anything here. I mean, we kind of accept what's there. So I think it's multiple things. I think from my perspective, and this is just my view about it, is that one of the things is that it's important to understand whether you can trust it in all shapes and forms. So you can trust the outcome that comes out of it. You can, from a responsible AI perspective, you trust it. You don't have legal implications as a result of that, and so on. So I would be very hesitant of generating something that goes out to a regulator without a 4-eye check and with a human in the loop and so on. So I think that becomes important. It's still an experimentation phase in many ways. So people are kind of trying to do what can we do, what can we do, what will we do. There's a lot of prototyping that is going on, and it's kind of I think it will need to get down to that level of maturity where people start to quite think about what can be standardized, what can be patterns, and what makes sense across the firm and what doesn't. You do not have too many industry level standard libraries yet, which kind of do things for you, so that there are no wrappers yet. Like in other tech, you would have like different layers of wrapper which abstract you from the complexity. It's kind of relatively standard. You would use Apache, for example, for a lot of things. I think a lot of that is missing right now. So it's a bit of a Wild West sort of thing. So the way I see it is that it depends on the nature of your organization. If you're if you're a type of organization where speed is critical and accuracy is probably not so much, maybe a little bit, but not so much. But some of the areas or companies or domains would probably adopt it a little faster, and some others will be a little more circumspect about it. I think that's probably that. I think the other where everybody is obviously will be chasing is productivity. Everybody is looking to kind of do more for less, spend less money, use less people, or have them do some other things. So that I think is a right thing to see, and that is already beginning to happen.
Takeaway from your conversation is more about like where the productivity co-pilot, where it's human and machine operating together, right? Just to expedite things. That is where the AI is useful, not something is standalone decisions or the process
So
orchestrate.
if I had to build a large piece of enterprise software, would I trust AI to do it completely? Maybe not yet, for various reasons. I would definitely use it in parts where I can obviously control it. I would obviously have it reviewed and have it checked and making sure it kind of sticks to the guardrails and so on and so forth. So that is probably important. But if I had to demo to a client, it's absolutely something that I would do. And obviously, I quoted two extremes. The trick is about finding that middle ground between the two, and that probably depends on the nature of the industry as well as knowledge, because it's also changing, right? So everybody is finding their feet with it, right?
So, if you want to name some of the tools, right, especially on the developer side or some of the daily productivity, I know that Copilot has done a great job. It has started irritating people because even on the Excel sheet, on each cell, they start popping up the Copilot icon. And it is just because Microsoft has engagement in as all the ecosystem, right? So it's very easy to embed their Copilot. But other than Copilot, what all the tools that you see is being adopted from a developer productivity, from manager productivity, or from process productivity perspective?
There are a large number of tools. There are many tools that are out there for very, very limited things. So there are a lot of beyond the developer productivity tools. There are obviously you see a lot of standard tools that organizations will use, already including a lot of AI within them, within their context. A lot of enterprise software now has AI modules, and there are things that it does with AI. And obviously there are questions around what data they're using and whether they would use client data to kind of enrich their models. But having said that, there's a lot that is happening in all software. So there is one category which is definitely about existing enterprise grade software. I think the third bit is about standard things which can automate your workflows and processes and things like that, and kind of I don't know if video generation and things like that,
Yeah.
and that you would use and smaller tasks and all of that. I wouldn't name the products as such because it's very volatile right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are
Someone is using like from developer's perspective, Cursor AI. Some uses Windsor,
right.
right?
It keeps changing.
Yeah, it keeps
So
changing.
keeps changing. So it depends across different areas.
But do you know, like, from a developer, because in the services industry, right, we know that in some of the areas we started leveraging tools like Cursor AI or GitHub Copilot and things like for developers' productivity. But do you see like the large organizations are also tending towards, or they are hesitating to see the stability?
The same thing, right? They would test it out because there are issues around security. Like the larger you get, and especially if you kind of go to regulated organizations, you would kind of make sure that you do not, expose something which kind of you don't control, and
Right.
so they would exactly want to know what's going on inside, and
Right.
so because of which that adoption to my mind will take a bit of time and will careful thought, and organizations will also not want to kind of create a cottage industry of multiple solutions across multi teams. They would probably standardize it to say that this and that are allowed just to make things faster and things more a little interoperable and so on. So therefore they would be in terms the larger scheme of things about, shall we chase this run really hard now or be a little more circumspect about it. I could be wrong here, but I think my sense is that the larger organization, the more you will you will not wait and watch, but you'll keep an eye on it, but you will probably limit it to a few things initially.
It also depends on once you roll out the features of the product like this, it also depends the level of maturity of your teams or the developer, right? I still remember the first code that I wrote in Java. I was connecting that database string and passing everything within the code itself,
Yeah.
right? So exposing these type of things are
Yeah.
very tricky. Everyone would like to avoid it. Moving to the next one, there are more hiring focused on AI, right? Or initiatives that you see in your network, or you see the traditional work is still happening, like the BI, Java, Python work, or you see more AI work starts happening.
If it can be generated, right? So it's definitely on the table. Yeah, I mean, I think depending again, like your size of organization and complexity of a business, and how regulated you are, and so on and so forth, multiple factors. You would obviously try to use tables, or you will evaluate them from a larger perspective. But I don't think there's a straightforward answer to this. I think my sense is that it will be a bit of a hybrid of both because you will need humans to it. You will need humans to design it. You will need humans to review it. You will need, there are you will need humans to also integrate with your legacy code. And, typically in larger organizations, enterprise organizations, ERPs or most extent, right? You connect to some sort of a data X layer, and there were multiple layers around it, and you will look at a whole bunch of other systems upstream, down. Especially when you're kind of doing that, you'll be very careful about how you kind of do it. So I mean, that's why I said, I mean, it's a lot easier with AI to spring up an application which is relatively standalone and which you can prototype and show and mock up a few things. It's a slightly different thing to integrate with many things, but then I don't know, that status right now, it might change.
Do you see like 5 years from now, there will be a time the way we are hiring human to do the coding, we will be hiring agents to do the same thing?
I don't think it will be 5 years from now.
Okay.
It will be
It will take more time
will
or sooner.
sooner.
Okay.
It will probably be sooner.
Interesting one and very personal to me, build versus buy. So how the leaders think about when to go for build, when to go for buy?
There's no straight answer. There are multiple things, situation dependent. My sense is that I was always a build guy personally, and I was my vested interest or a developer, so I would want to developer rather than configure. But then, having said that, all of that aside, beyond the obvious benefits of build of buy, from what I have seen and felt, is that there is an increasing realization that ultimately there are things like license costs and so on. Ultimately, you pay more than you need. Ultimately, the implementation, like we spoke earlier, can be a nightmare sometimes. Ultimately, you cannot iterate it because if you're buying an enterprise software and you're trying to build a new feature which is important to your business, it's very difficult to get that added, especially if you're in SaaS. So these are known challenges. I think people are cognizant of these challenges. And I think in my experience, I think in my conversation, even outside the organization as well, or in general, I think that realization has also been a growing realization over a period of time. I think it is no longer as straightforward as that why build it if you can buy it. And you can, because people realize that even the buy thing is not that easy because it comes with a lot of strings attached. It's a calculated decision, I would say, Anil. I mean, but I think there is obviously some sections of the community sometimes talk about the fact that with AI I can build a lot faster, so that time to market thing that we were talking about, is that
Is
valid?
trending more towards the
Is it so valid anymore? But there is also a counter argument, which is that, well, do we want to create a cottage industry of, I don't know, an organization creating like 7 different HR systems for all sorts of different things? I mean, there are pros and cons to both. But I think there's an increasing openness about the fact that it's sometimes it makes sense to buy. It's about, see, the other thing is also about, let's say you're a relatively smaller organization and you want to get jumpstart everything. It makes sense to buy, especially if you're not in the core business of selling that software that you're buying. But as you get larger and larger, the buying decision becomes a little easier because you don't have or rather the build decision becomes a little easier because there are various aspects that you can think of and so on, and you can take that hit and make that investment.
I think the way how I see from my clients, my learning is when there is a very clear demand of a technology product, right? Let's say that someone wants to use their code repository, right? It's no brainer. They will always go for buy option. When there is
Right.
things like
Yeah.
a collaboration or like project management, it is
Yes.
no brainer, right?
Of
But
course.
when it becomes too mixed with their business process, then it tends to like, do we build our own product, own the IP, so that there is no vendor locking? Otherwise there are more challenges over the period of time. It starts with like faster response at the beginning of the program, but over the period of time you have to churn more money to maintain it.
Yeah, and see, I think the other exactly. So the other challenge is that, well, let's say you build it, right? So even building can be complex, and one of the problems with building sometimes is that
Yeah.
building does not expose you to the best practices of the market.
Yeah.
So when you buy something, it is a distillation of what everybody uses largely. So it's standardized across the industry. So let's say if I am a company or I'm a department,
Yeah.
doing my own thing in probably not the best way
Yeah.
possible, like that it should be done. Building means that I can translate my business practices or my operational practices which have room for improvement into a flawed implementation that I've customized just for me, which probably is not correct in the first place. Operationally it could be wrong, so
Right.
I can superimpose my bad operations processes
Yeah.
onto the software product that I build. Whereas buying sometimes keeps me honest. It's become a lot more
Sometimes buying also fixes your garbage process, right?
correct. Crash everything and do it from, because everybody else is doing it. That's one example. His motivation also to buy that if all major firms are doing it, then why does this have to be different? So there's no easy answer to your question as to whether you buy or build.
Buying definitely helps you follow the best practices and industry standardization. Or if you are building, then definitely do the right research so that you at least set up the process
Yeah.
in your organization. So that's my takeaway. Now, in terms of talent, skill, and how the future work looks like, I know that while AI is in adoption, right, and organizations are thinking about AI infused workflow, right? But for a fresher, like how do you see like how, if someone is watching this video, right, and they would like to join your team in the future, what they should do now, or how they make themselves visible so that you think, okay, I can take decision to hire this fresher.
Okay, so things that have changed and things that have not changed.
Yeah.
Fundamentals of engineering, fundamentals of writing software, your DSS, for example, your core algorithms, learning one language really well, having a solid GitHub profile
Mhm.
with good projects in it, no change in that. You will be probably be a bit surprised, perhaps, Anil, and maybe it's your own reflection as well. We do see a lot of grads actually joining organizations and do really well. Sometimes, in my experience, I've seen sometimes fresh grads doing much better than even experienced folks in the organization, and you yourself were among them, where some people have been trailblazing, because so it's less about the number of years of experience you put in and so on. So that hasn't changed. Absolutely, that is essential, right? What has probably changed is your exposure to a wider stack of AI tools or non-AI tools and so on. So the more exposure you have to these things, the better it is. And the reason for that exposure is that when you build a solution, the focus is on the end business. Right. To do the end business, you need to have multiple things, arsenals in your quiver, or in your arrows in your quiver, to solve the problem. So which means that you need to have exposure to how you are going to construct multiple things and join all of them together to build a solution.
Right.
So the end-to-end nature of the solution using multiple things, for perhaps the additional thing that has now come in. So if you are able to design solutions, look at the business impact and the outcome, as well as translate that back to a combination of different things that you've used, while keeping your fundamentals intact, I don't see a that big a challenge. Of course, there is a so what I'm saying is that it's not as black and white as that. Oh, you're a fresher. AI can code whatever you can. You are no longer required.
Right.
It is not that. It is not as simplistic as that. There is. I personally do realize that sometimes a lot of freshers are definitely an asset.
Yeah.
In terms of enthusiasm, willingness to learn, how well you can mold them to the situation. There is obviously some bit of cost advantage as well. And that's probably not the main thing, but so like the combination of that, there is still a lot of value potential to getting freshers, as long as they expect they got their fundamentals right, they got their learning mindset right, they have some bit of customer orientation and empathy, and they have some level of hunger to succeed and do things differently.
The next thing, do you think India is positioned to lead the next wave of digital or AI driven industries globally?
I way above my pay grade, and I think there are a lot of learned people who can comment better on that. Well, I mean, I think for every country you can say we can, but I think as of now it doesn't like we are, and this is my personal take. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we led the IT boom. Everybody talked about Indian engineers, and
Yeah.
there was a lot of time when people were just fixing, time, of fields in for Y2K, and people used to think that we are all very smart.
Yeah.
Now, whether there's truth to it or is a different story altogether. But from that perspective, I think it should have been us to leapfrog into AI. I think we are definitely distant followers rather than leaders in AI yet. Can we catch up? Of course, for sure we can, because we can scale.
Yeah.
Nobody can scale as well as we can. The level of flexibility and agility that we show. But the problem is that good enough? Because are we at the cutting edge of creating AI level tech? No, we're not. A lot of that is about perhaps our education systems or our colleges and the level of research we do. I think the fact that a lot of our colleges do not feature in the top 500, there are very few actually in the world. I think reflective of the fact that unless we do more research, I don't think we are that. We're an execution based society rather than a research based society, with some exceptions. So
You mentioned this in one of the section of this podcast, right? We talked about that we just started in this game, right? So the future may be bright if we set this up
Yeah.
correctly, and some of these foundational work that is happening at the government level or the institutional level that might help. On the next part of the section, how do you personally manage work-life balance while leading such large teams?
first of all, I think leading a large team can be is not a badge of honor. Frankly speaking, I think these days it's the other way around. It's about the impact you create. I think it's a bit of a myth. I don't think there is such a thing. You try the best that you can. I think if you do a 9 to 5, then I don't think you succeed. So I think I'm also not a subscriber to the other extreme where you're calling people at work at 10 or 10 p.m. in the night. So I'm absolutely not a subscriber to that. But the fact is that I don't think we are people who switch personalities at work, and then we come back and we're in our home mode. We are all the things at the same time all the time. When you it's about what you're focusing on at that point of time, if that makes sense. So I don't think there is such a thing where you there is a difference. I mean, it depends on how far you want to go and how much you want to succeed. Completely depends on the hunger you have. But I think in the world where things are changing so dynamically, I think it's also about to survive. I think you'll need to go the extra mile. And that's the reality of life. Now, whether you're a fresher or you're a more experienced person, you are on the razor's edge. So you would have to kind of keep reinventing, keep thinking, keep learning.
What's one leadership lesson that completely changed your perspective?
I think I had a very Boolean way of looking at leadership when I was younger, which is that when a leader, I used to feel that a leader said something. I used to read those words very carefully. I still do to my leaders, and you would do that followership immediately after that. And it's probably a Gen X thing, because I was Gen X. I am Gen X. I think now the realization is that the leader also needs to be open and wants you to question back, because my realization is that as you go more into leadership, is that you realize that you're also vulnerable, you're also human, and most of the time that decisions that leaders take are not easy, and they are in a lot of ambiguity with many variables. So you could technically get it wrong. You just hope to get it right most of the times.
Yeah.
You will never get it all wrong. All right. So you will be wrong, things that you say may or do may not fall in exactly as you planned them. As a leader, you need to be nimble and agile and pivot. And as somebody who's looking to leadership, they should learn from that experience from the leader, but you should also have it in you to kind of challenge and ask the right questions to basically to so that for the leader also to kind of also look at here a different perspective. And I as a leader would also want to do that from from people who work with me to basically challenge whatever my thought process is.
The last question and most important of this topic, right? What inspires you, right? There are people like me who inspire with your way of working, but what inspires you within your industry or maybe anything in common?
I like working with people. I think for me the cause is very important. What you are trying to achieve. I think the goal inspires me. If the goal is interesting enough, I go after that goal. I like going after a goal, and it feels like we're kind of this is our moment, and we'll all do this together and we'll get there together. I think that common goal. Now that goal could potentially be anything. It could be a program that we're delivering. It could be a large transformation that we want to do. It could be something that we are adopting. It could be a whatever goal it is, right? So but that goal basically is probably my biggest aspiration. Is probably a very tactical way of looking at it, but to my mind I think that objective is primary source of inspiration that basically motivates me.
That makes you go extra mile.
Yeah, the goal, if I believe in the cause and I believe in the goal, that itself is that's the primary thing that motivated.
So, anything that we want to conclude this discussion, right? And thanks for taking time over the weekend and traveling this long way. But anything that you want to conclude this discussion?
No, I mean, huge thank you and a lot of interesting questions, to be honest. And I mean, I think it was very thought provoking. So huge appreciation towards you, and also see how you have grown since the time we've known each other. So yeah, so thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir.